Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the To The Point podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. Coming off a weekend where a lot was happening. There's obviously the hockey, basketball of the world. Major League Baseball is 10 days away from opening day, but really it was March Madness that really took center stage. When this tournament comes on, a lot of the other big ticket sports are put on the back burner because just the notoriety that this tournament has, all the publicity it gets, it being on CBS, TNT, the mothership. So just a huge, massive event. And we're going to get into that today. Going to talk about some NHL stories, of course, some big golf news that broke late last night. So we're going to touch on all of it. But starting, we got to talk about March Madness. And the first day, it usually starts on a Thursday. The tournament, you see Thursday, Friday's first round, Saturday, Sunday, second round. It's different this year. They needed extra time for COVID. It's going to start. It started Friday, Saturday opening round yesterday, and today is the second round. So games all day today, including this afternoon. And the major headline of the tournament so far, I could come up with a bunch. Obviously, a number one seed's already been eliminated in Illinois. We saw a number two seed in Ohio State get beat, who I thought could have went on a deep run and potentially win it, but they lose in the first round, ergo this tournament. But it's got to be the Cinderellas so far. And, for the second time in tournament history, a number 15 seed is off the Sweet 16, and that's Oral Roberts. Before this tournament, I had no clue where Oral Roberts was. I looked it up. It's just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I had no clue. I'd heard of the school. I had no idea the geographic location. Yet they come into this tournament, beat Ohio State. Like I said, one of the best teams in the nation all year. A couple of really great players in Dwayne Washington Jr. and CJ Vidal. They're gone. Then they play number 7 Florida last night. Obviously the heavy underdog again, Florida, an SEC school, pretty good basketball program. They should win this game, right? Oral Roberts comes back late, down 7, beats Florida 61-58. They're off to the Sweet 16. The second 15 seed ever to get to the Sweet 16, the first since Florida Gulf Coast, who went on their Cinderella run. And it's not just Oral Roberts. We got number 12 Oregon State, a team that's again a low seed, but they beat, you could say, the player of the year in college basketball last night in Cade Cunningham in Oklahoma State, beating them, putting them out of the tournament. Another big upset. Number 11, Syracuse. Syracuse, this school, did not have a great season, but they get in the tournament, and it's these teams with pedigree, and they have coaches that know how to do it. The coach, coaching for Syracuse, it's his 16th trip to the Sweet 16, the most ever. And then you got Albine Christian. Again, I never heard of that school, Albine Christian. I'm sure it's a religious school just by the name, but they beat Texas. They beat Texas by a point, and they played today in the second round. But it's just craziness. That's a 14, a 15, a 12, an 11. And the top 3 I named, Oral Roberts, Oregon State, Syracuse, they're all in the Sweet 16. It's bedlam. We see Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago in 2018 went on one of the Cinderella runs that we're talking about. They were an 11 seed. They got to the Final Four. They're playing good basketball. Yesterday, they beat their in-state rival, Illinois. They go to the Sweet 16. Who knows? We saw them do it. They made it to at least the Sweet 16 in 2 of the last 3 tournaments. I mean, it's Loyola Chicago. It's not a big program, but they work hard. They're a hardworking team. And, one thing about all these teams and about these Cinderella is they don't have names that you remember. Like Oral Roberts has this kid named Max Abamas. He looks like a great little point guard. If he didn't make the tournament, he'd be an afterthought. You got Cameron Crutwig for Loyola Chicago, their big center. He's not going to be a great NBA player, but for Loyola Chicago in this tournament, he's made an impact twice, and he'll be remembered for being on Loyola Chicago on these teams that made an impact in the tournament. And it's crazy, but that's what this tournament can do. It gives it's constantly in flux. And there's a slew of games today where I'm sure we're going to see something happen. So far, we still have 3 number 1 seeds in the tournament. Baylor advancing. They're going to play Villanova in the Sweet 16. Baylor looks strong to me, even though Villanova has been one of the more impressive teams through the first 2 games, and I didn't expect to see that. They're missing one of their top players. Again, they didn't have a great season in the Big East, but Jay Wright, he's got pedigree. He's got 2 national championships. So we'll see what happens there. We got Michigan playing today. We also have Gonzaga playing Oklahoma later. So, Michigan, LSU, Gonzaga, Oklahoma, obviously the number 1 seeds will be favorites. The LSU game's interesting for me. That could be I smell a little bit of upset there. I think Michigan's a really good team with Hunter Dickinson and what they can do. But LSU, if they can get hot from shooting beyond the arc, I think they're going to win the game. And that's really where they live and die, is if they can get hot shooting threes. Michigan likes to go in the paint, and obviously threes are more than twos. And if you're hitting them consistently, I give LSU at least a puncher's chance of advancing. But, another story of the first weekend is COVID. VCU was supposed to play Oregon Saturday night, and about half hour before tip, we learned that VCU's had multiple players test positive. They're out of the tournament. Oregon automatically advances. They'll play Iowa later today. It's a tough break, obviously, for VCU. And, Oregon just advances on a walkover, and I don't know how I feel about it. Again, it's not their fault, so to speak, but could there have been a replacement team? How, VCU, was it just that day that you get the testing? I mean, they're testing every day. So it's weird how these tests work. But if there could have been a replacement, if there could have been another change, I would have liked to have seen that, because now you have Oregon playing Iowa. I mean, Iowa's at number 2. Oregon is a lower seed. But we'll see what happens. I think for Iowa, I don't love it. Again, for Oregon, just to get past the round without having to earn it like everybody else has, it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth a little bit. But they're in tough today against Iowa. Luka Garza, who's one of the big names to watch in this tournament, played fantastic in the opening round. And, Iowa looks strong. If you listen to our podcast last week between me and Matt Wright, he's a big Iowa guy. He's got them going deep, and they look good after round 1. But the thing about this tournament is I don't think you can look at game to game, because this might be a take that's a cold take, but I'm not a person that believes in momentum. I think if you're in a series and you win game 6, well, you have that momentum going to game 6. I don't buy that. I think every game starts fresh, and it's just about your mental perseverance. I don't believe in momentum. You can start playing better than the opposing team, but I really don't believe that you have momentum going to a certain game and that's why you win. I just don't believe that. Playing sports that I did grow up, that I did growing up, it's not about momentum. It's about heart. It's about what you got in the tank. And yeah, it's definitely a strange thing, but I don't see momentum being this tournament. You can't look at it game to game, because in round 1, Iowa, just use that for an example. They look great. And you know what? They may win today, but they're playing Oregon, who we haven't seen play. So does Oregon have any momentum? No, they haven't played. I mean, they're coming off a showing in the Big 12 championship where they lost in the semifinals. They're coming off a loss, so no momentum. I just think sports, it's less about momentum and it's more about who wants it more. And I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. For an example, last year when the Toronto Maple Leafs were down to Columbus 3-0 in Game 6, they came back and won the game. And they won in overtime. Who had the momentum going into Game 5? I would say Toronto. Columbus just blew a 3-0 lead. Toronto won the game. They look like they're going to go to the second round. They're moving on to the playoffs. they lost game 5. So all that momentum, was it there? They lost the game. They had all the momentum going in, and then it just squashed. So for me, it's just about work ethic in that game. I mean, game in, game out, a team could be the Harlem Globetrotters one game. The next game, they could show up and it doesn't look like they have, their shoes or skates on. Again, it's just about mental preparation, being ready, and having, playing with heart. And I look at a lot of these schools. Oral Roberts is not more talented than Ohio State. Oral Roberts is not more talented than Florida. But I truly believe they wanted it more. They wanted it more than Ohio State. I watched that game on Friday. They believed in each other. And they said, you know what? We're going to slay the giant. And then they did it again. And it's because they just bought in as a team. One person is not equal to the sum of its parts. What I mean by that is no one person is bigger than the team. And I think you see that on some of these stages where, for example, last night in Oklahoma State, Cade Cunningham, he's a freshman, likely going to win freshman of the year, maybe win player of the year in college basketball. He got a little ball hog last night. Didn't want to pass, turn the ball over, trying to do too much. Where you have Oral Roberts, who are just finding the open guy. Oregon State, they didn't have an alpha dog last night. They just spread the ball around. Everybody's getting points. It contributes to a victory. That's where I see the disconnect here. Where some of the bigger schools, whether coaching or you get to this big moment where you're like, where people are saying, you know what, this is my time. I'm going to put on a show. I'm going to go to the NBA. This is going to be great for my draft. And to think that doesn't seep into people's minds, I mean, it's human nature. You're thinking about that next step. And of course, when you lose the game, it's crushing. Because you want to win the national championship here too, and then go to the NBA, have all kinds of success, make money, what have you. But sometimes it's just the team. I mentioned Loyola Chicago. They're not that talented. They have a center who's white, who's not athletic, who isn't even that great a shape, but the guy just worked. And you see the team, how close they are when they win. It's just about, again, heart. And I think that gets you so far in this tournament where, yes, you need talent, of course. You need some luck, but buying in as a team, buying into a program, and doing what the coach is telling you also gets you very far. And I think you're seeing teams like Syracuse, Oregon State, Oral Roberts, these teams that shouldn't be winning on paper are continuing to win and do well at this tournament. So, that continues this afternoon. The second Sweet 16 will start Friday, but a full slate of action today with the other half of the draw going off. I mentioned Michigan. You got Gonzaga playing today. You got Oregon and Iowa. So a lot of good basketball to come today. Alabama, Maryland later tonight. So a lot still to be decided. I'll be doing a podcast with Matt Wright later in the week to talk all about it. And but a lot of good stuff on the horizon here for March Madness. Great tournament so far. Over the weekend, I like to talk about this podcast about the media and how they're great at what they do, most of them. And I'm actually being sincere. I know I can be a bit neurotic in my thinking sometimes, but most of them are great at what they do. Some media people write really stupid stories, either positive or negative. They show their bias. Sometimes they write prediction pieces on trades, and I'm just like, this is idiotic. I don't know where you came up with this. Like last year, I read a piece about McDavid getting traded to Toronto, and it wasn't in the Onion or a joke. It was on Sportsnet, and I really thought you need to take that down because that's just ridiculous. I mean, that's just clearly a Toronto homer writing a stupid article for clicks, and more power to him. But another thing Toronto loves to do is, to their credit, the media and the team, when they get a player who starts doing well, you're going to know about it. Toronto traded for Alex Galchenyuk, and now Alex Galchenyuk is saving grace. He's going to be a 40-goal scorer, and he's playing on the second line. And great, it's down to 17th in 4 years. We'll see how that goes. But I'll get to Galchenyuk in that story. But the bigger one for me over the weekend is now there's a goalie controversy. You got Jack Campbell versus Frederik Andersen. Who's the starter? Who do they run with? And it's funny to me in a couple scenarios. Has Jack Campbell played great this year? Yes. 4 games, 2 shutouts. Fantastic. But, there's something I said there at the beginning of that. He's played 4 games. So I can look at that a couple different ways. Health. The guy's been injured all year. He can't stay healthy. The guy got hurt because Matthew Tkachuk barely landed on him. So durability, question mark. There's also about Campbell. He's played 67 games in the NHL. He's 29. He was a former first round pick of the Dallas Stars, but it hasn't worked for him. Is he a capable backup? Yes. But now, Toronto, they've turned on Freddie Andersen. And Freddie, he's done it to himself in a sense. He's played terrible. But the team hasn't played that well in front of him either. You got to remember that. In their stretch, they've lost 6 out of 8 games. I look at Justin Hall. He's taken a big step back in his play. He's turning the puck over. I think he's been really struggling. I think you got to look at that. You got to look at their lineup. Injuries happen, and they've missed some people. Again, they're playing Joe Thornton out of position, which I've been saying for weeks, which makes no sense. Matthews, I think, was turning into a really good 150-foot player. Since his wrist injury, he hasn't been the same player to me. It's not just because he's not scoring goals. He's just not as impactful as he's on the ice. Mitch Marner will have a game where he puts up 4 points, looks like a top 10 player of the league. And there's other games where he's trying to be a hero. He's throwing the puck around. And, he's basically a turnover machine, which leads to scoring chances on the other end. So there's layers to everything. But it's thrown into a blender when you get Jack Campbell, who gets a shutout Saturday night against Calgary. Great. You win 2-0, good shutout. But the guy's played 1 game in the last month and a half, and now he's the starting goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think it's ridiculous. Again, they're off till Thursday. He should start Thursday. No doubt. But to say that there's a goalie controversy when, again, Jack Campbell's barely played a cup of coffee in the NHL. He's a journeyman. He's 29, and now he's a starting goalie. And I think the net's Freddie's. You're living and dying with Freddie Andersen. He's a better goalie than Jack Campbell. And has he shown up small in the playoffs? Yes. But so have other players. What did Matthews and Marner do in Game 5 last year? They didn't get a point. What has John Tavares done in the playoffs since he's come to Toronto? A whole lot of nothing, kind of like what he's done this year. So to say that there's a goalie controversy, I just think it's a story it's really sad. It's really weak. Freddie Andersen's not playing with a lot of confidence right now. He's letting in some bad goals. So, Bob's your uncle. Of course, he's going to be a punching bag. And I think they love to find a new goalie or to find a hot story to talk about. But let's let Jack Campbell play a few games. I'm fine if they get to a point in the playoffs where Jack Campbell's just owning it and they're saying, start the playoffs, we're playing Winnipeg, first round, Jack Campbell starting. If he's played in the last 20 and he plays 16 of them and he's solid, no qualms. He earned it. But to say that it's his net now, he's got this long runway when he's played 4 games, okay, pump the brakes. Because the only reason that's the narrative is because Freddie's been playing bad. It's not because Campbell's earned this opportunity. He's played 1 game in the last month and a half. So, again, I'm not saying it's not going to be a story, but right now it isn't one. Because the guy's done nothing to earn an opportunity at getting a starting job. In sports, in life, you earn your opportunities. Jack Campbell hasn't earned this one. maybe Freddie has played his way out of it, the opportunity to be a starting goaltender, but you don't have another option that you should feel comfortable with. Again, I'm going to repeat this. Jack Campbell's played 67 games in the NHL. And maybe, just saying, well, we've had Freddie starting goal in the playoffs. We haven't won anything. Let's change it up. That's not a good reason to do it. It's a terrible reason to do it. Just because you failed, 100 times and you said, well, we have a guy who we don't know is going to pass or fail, but, we'll throw him in there just for fun. Okay. That's good policy. Probably win a lot of games doing that. But, Toronto gets back on the winning ways Saturday night. I mentioned they win 2-0. Campbell, obviously big start, gets a shutout. We say Alex Galchenyuk got a point. One thing I'll give credit to Sheldon Keefe. He's playing him in a top 6 role. If Alex Galchenyuk's going to be a positive story for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he's going to be playing top 6 minutes. Last year in Minnesota, he was playing on the 4th line. It made no sense. Galchenyuk's a skill player. He's not a guy that's going to throw checks. He's not going to play 200 feet. That's not his game. He's a skill forward where he can make things happen offensively. And it wasn't a bad option to put him with Tavares and Nylander because, quite frankly, Tavares has been quiet for a long time. The guys looked a step behind all year when it comes to his skating. He's never fast, but he doesn't have it. His finishing ability around the net, not there. So I don't mind the move. I think he's clearly a placeholder. Toronto wants to make a move at the trade deadline. If Alex Galchenyuk's on the second line left wing when the playoffs start, I'd be shocked. Quite frankly, I don't think Alex Galchenyuk will be in the lineup when the playoffs start. Because again, if you make a trade, then who comes out? Then who's going to move? They're going to take his spot. You're not playing him on the third line, because Sheldon Keefe loves that third line of the checking players. You can put him on the 4th line with Spezza and Thornton? Probably not. So I think it's a good little project for him, but I don't expect to see it long term. Toronto needs an upgrade at left wing. It's really their most glaring need. I think it's almost as important for me, just personally, for them to upgrade their defense core. Get a better 6th defenseman. Travis Dermott's not the answer. Get a better 6th guy that can play minutes. But the left side is a glaring need. And what will happen? And for Toronto, they were in cruise control. It's not so cruise control anymore. Again, this is the standings. You got Toronto 42 points, Edmonton's with 42 points. Toronto does have 3 games in hand. On the Oilers, they'll have 5 by the time they play again Thursday. You got Winnipeg with 38, who have played 1 less game than the Maple Leafs. You got Montreal at 37, Vancouver 35, who have played 4 more games than Toronto. They've already played 35, and Calgary 33. So it's not a cakewalk, this division title anymore. Winnipeg had a tough week last week where they lost twice to the Oilers. The Oilers have played good hockey since getting shellacked by the Leafs a couple weeks ago. McDavid, it's crazy. It's going to be a 56-game season, and the last time we had a shortened season was the lockout. And in that lockout season, Martin St. Louis had 60 points in 48 games. It's, pretty good season. McDavid's played 33 games, this year. He's already at 60 points. It's just crazy. He's on pace. If it was an 82-game season, he's on a 144-point pace. The guy's on fire. He's Matthews and him were close in points about 2 weeks ago. He's now 24 up on Matthews. The guy's going to win the Art Ross. I think if they can finish top 2 in this division, you'll see him win the Hart. But incredible stuff what he's doing out there. But again, in this division, it's going to be about matchups. You got Toronto, who plays Montreal a lot down the stretch. You got Calgary, who plays Montreal another 5 times. They're fighting for playoff position. Vancouver only has 21 games left. They've played 35. And can they find a way to get into the playoffs? I mean, they're trailing Winnipeg, trailing Vancouver right now. trailing Montreal right now, but can they find a way to get in there? We've seen guys like Brock Besser, JT Miller step up in the past couple weeks for Vancouver, really start playing better hockey. Montreal, they had lost 9 games in overtime so far this year. They win in the gimmick Saturday night, finally. But, they got to try to find their game. Can they get consistent goal scoring? Winnipeg losing twice last week. I still think Winnipeg's the best team in the Canadian division. They need to upgrade their defense, but the trade deadline, that's a must for them. But I think they have a top 2 goalie in the NHL, Hellebuyck, Vasilevsky. I'd put both of them above Carey Price right now. But, Hellebuyck coming off of Vezina, he's looked fantastic this year. So it's no cakewalk. It looked like it was going to be for a couple weeks. But Toronto's inconsistent play, other teams having time to catch up with them in points. It should be interesting to see what happens here down the stretch, but a lot still to be decided in this division and a lot of interesting races down the stretch. We got, the Rocket Richard race now. Matthews had such a lead when it comes to goals. He injured his wrist, missed some games. Since coming back, he's been, clearly playing hurt for me, but not really that effective. You got McDavid now has 21 goals. They're tied. Matthews has game in hand, but McDavid can get hot. When it comes to scoring goals, getting points, nobody gets more than him. So we'll see what that's an interesting race down the stretch. So a lot still to be decided in this division, but I look at, they've all have good stories in it for players. Like in Edmonton, Tyson Barrie did not work in Toronto for whatever reason. The team and him, the fit wasn't there. He goes to Edmonton. He's leading the NHL in defenseman points, having a great year. So he's a great story. I look at Toronto. Prior to the last couple of weeks, Justin Hall has been a fantastic story for them. He's a guy who's really a cast-off. Mike Babcock loved to scratch him more than anybody. Played 4 games, scratched 7. They played 11 games 1 year, scratched 72 straight, and he's playing great hockey. You got Vancouver, which really started hitting the ditch. Tough look. Now they're finding their game. Thatcher Demko has got a .969 save percentage in the last month. One of the best, probably the best player in the NHL over that last stretch, stopping 97% of the shots he's faced. Incredible stuff. So, the list can go on and on. You got Daryl Sutter in Calgary. You got, again, Toronto, I said Justin Hall. Winnipeg, for me, a really productive story this year has been Adam Lowry. Just the way Neil Pionk is a guy nobody really knew about, but it's worked out fantastic for them in their trade with Jacob Trouba. So a lot still to be decided in this Canadian division. Finally, it's interesting because it was really a snooze fest for a number of weeks. Start the year, we kind of, in the Central Division, we saw a logjam. We saw Tampa, Florida, Carolina, all pretty close. Then, it was Columbus who could not find their game. Chicago was riding high. Patrick Kane playing at an MVP level. But Chicago's really hit the ditch lately. They've had to play the tough teams in the division. They played Tampa a lot lately. They played Florida. And it's resulted in losses. And then you've seen Columbus and their schedule. They've gotten a couple wins last week against Carolina. They beat up on Dallas, Detroit. So they're now tied for the last playoff spot. Columbus is now tied with Chicago in the Central. But before I get to that, the Tampa Bay Lightning, this team, I said it from the beginning, they're still the best team until somebody can prove to me otherwise. And the only team that I could realistically make an argument is Vegas. Again, you're not seeing Tampa play Toronto, play this, you could say whoever, Washington, in these divisions. If you're a fan of a team, you're like, well, that's not true. Well, I think it is. They're not playing with Nikita Kucherov. They've had injuries all year, but yet they have 2 guys on their roster who are, as if the season ended today, would win awards. Victor Hedman would win his second Norris Trophy. To me, it's not even close. I don't know who would come in second. I don't know, maybe John Carl, maybe Tyson Barrie. I think Charlie McAvoy would get votes. I think he's had a really productive year, but it's Hedman and then everybody else. And, Andre Vasilevsky is going to win the Vezina. The guy's been spectacular all year. Played another great game Saturday against Chicago, only letting in one goal. The guy can play hockey. Let's just say that. And, Steven Stamkos, out all the playoffs last year, tough break. He's rebounded, played really well. You're seeing just guys step up. Ross Colton got recalled. He's scoring goals. Matthew Joseph was a black ace for the Lightning last year in the playoffs. He's got 8 goals. Killorn's got 9. Cirelli's got 10. Yanni Gourde's got 11. They just got guys that chip in. They still have their elite players in Braden Point, Hedman. Of course, you still got Sergachev, McDonough on the back end, strong defense core. But it's just these guys that they acquire that just pitch in. Again, they traded for Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman last year at the trade deadline. These for number 1 picks, but these guys worked out for them, and this team looks like the team that won the cup last year. And it's really difficult to repeat. We saw Pittsburgh do it in 16 and 17, but I think Tampa can do it. I look at Vegas. I think, to me, that's their toughest competition because Vegas has such a deep team. With they can throw so many waves at you. You got Pacioretty, you got Marchessault, Riley Smith, Mark Stone. You look at William Carrier and Reeves on that fourth line, what they bring, Chandler Stevenson. And on their back end, you got Pietrangelo and you got Martinez, Shea Theodore. And you got Marc-Andre Fleury in net, who's playing at a very high level too. So those 2 teams to me are the best 2 teams in the NHL so far this year when it comes to just being consistent. They're the best. But Tampa, they got a 4-point lead in the division now. Florida's still playing really good hockey. I've been impressed with them all year. You expect, okay, yeah, this team's off to a great start. They'll dip. We saw Chicago do it because Patrick Kane could only play so great for so long without, the offense drying up from the others, so to speak. But you look at Tampa, you look at Florida, I'm sorry. They haven't. Carter Verhaeghe's got 12 goals. Barkov's playing at a very high level. He's a sneaky guy for me to get some hard votes. I don't think he will because he plays in Florida, and it seems like every media person's just focused on the Canadian division this year. So it wouldn't shock me to see at the end of the year the Hart Trophy vote getters are McDavid, Matthews, and then throw somebody else in there. They'll feel bad for somebody and throw them in there from the States. But Florida just they haven't dipped. You got Barkov. You got Verhaeghe, who's having a great year. Huberdeau. Bobrovsky's starting to find his game. He struggled from the jump, but he's found his game a little bit. So positive sign. Patrick Hornquist has been a great add. He's got 12 goals. He's playing an effective role in that team. So again, you got Carolina, Florida, Tampa, but I think Tampa's really starting to show we're playing in a really tough division, but we're still the team that won the cup last year. We should be feared. We should be, you don't want to mess with us. And I think the Lightning are starting to show that more and more consistently as we get through the games here. And I also mentioned, Columbus. They've tied Chicago for the 4th playoff spot in the Central. They're both tied at 33 points now, even games. So head-to-head will be big down the stretch. Also, can Chicago find their game a little bit? But what's interesting is how this could affect the trade deadline. Columbus, again, tied for the last playoff spot. What do they do with Nick Foligno? What do they do with David Savard? They're both unrestricted free agents. I'm sure Jarmo Kekalainen does not want to lose them for nothing. Maybe he thinks he can bring Nick Foligno back. Definitely at a reduced salary. He's making $5.5 million. But Savard, UFA, from all I've heard, they don't expect for him to be back because he'll get more money in the open market. So do you try to make the playoffs and lose in the first round to Tampa? Or do you sell off David Savard now while you can? Do you trade him to Winnipeg, see what you can get for assets? I think that's going to be an interesting storyline because if they're in a playoff position, I'm sure John Tortorella is not going to want, some of his best players being moved. But for the long term of Columbus, it might be a better option to trade away Savard, Foligno, get assets, because this team needs some talent when it comes to offensively. They got Laine, so if they want to keep Laine long term, trading away Foligno and Savard wouldn't be the best selling point, because you're basically saying, yeah, we're kind of moving on. We're probably not going to be a great playoff team, so we'll see what happens. But interesting, they're two of the big names that are on the market, and they both play in Columbus. But as they start to win more games, that chatter is going to get less and less loud, because if you're winning, it doesn't make much sense to trade away people. You might want to think about adding a player. So we'll see what happens there. But Columbus, they fought their way back into this race. The next couple weeks will probably be very important to see what they do with Savard, with Foligno, before the April 12th trade deadline. Another team that's found their game lately is the Colorado Avalanche. McKinnon's been kind of hurt all year, but he's found his game. 3-point Saturday. Mikko Rantanen's up to 17 goals. They beat Minnesota 6-0. But they're right there. You got Vegas. I think they're really tough out too. Obviously, they got to beat Vegas in presumptively the second round to get to conference final and get out of that division. But I look at that team in Joe Sakic. It's time to make some moves. I look at their forward group. In their bottom six, I think you could use an addition. Again, Nick Foligno would be a good add there. If they wanted to pull the trigger on a guy like that. I like their defense core a lot, so that's not where I'd look. They got Philip Grubauer. He's playing great this year, but he's never done it in the playoffs. That worries me. So I don't know if he's the long-term answer in net. Again, he's played like a starter this year. I don't think they'll add to their goaltending, but it would be terrible for that team if they lose because they don't have an experienced goaltender or a guy they can trust. And I worry that's what's going to happen down the pike here for the Colorado Avalanche. But again, McKinnon, Rantanen, when they're going, Landeskog's having a good season. So I think when this team's healthy, they're super, super dangerous. Adding a bottom six forward would be great for this team just to see what they can do, and try to push all their chips into the table. I think Colorado's in a similar position to Toronto, where Colorado has had more playoff success than Toronto, but they're both teams with Sakic, who's a younger general manager, Dubas, younger general manager, and they're saying, let's try to win here. Let's do it all that we can to give our team the best chance to win. And I think they should both have the same mindset where, Toronto, I think, has an easier path, clearly, in the Canadian division. But if you're Colorado, you got to say, well, we got to beat Vegas. So if we're going to beat Vegas, we may need this, this, and this. I go get that, and that, because the time is now. This year's a COVID year. It's different. And to beat that Vegas team that's loaded with top to bottom talent and all the lines are really productive, you're going to need a great effort. And we'll see what Colorado does come the trade deadline. Pivoting to the NBA. The NBA is moving on here. A lot of good storylines. You got, Joel Embiid went down with an injury for the Philadelphia 76ers. They continue to win. They get a 2-pack of wins over the weekend. They beat Sacramento Saturday. Then they beat the Knicks last night in overtime. They continue to be first in the Eastern Conference. You got James Harden, who got traded from Houston to Brooklyn early in the season. He's averaging over 11 assists a game, which if he could get to 12, it would set a new NBA record for assists in a season when it comes to statistical, game in, game out, averaging 12 assists a season. So we'll see if he can do that down the stretch. They sit a game back of Philadelphia. Then you have some new teams. You got like Charlotte Hornets that were, led by LaMelo Ball. The New York Knicks, who are in a playoff spot right now. The Boston Celtics have had an up and down season with some bad losses lately. But the big headline Saturday afternoon, was Lakers playing the Hawks, and LeBron James was forced to leave the game with a high ankle sprain. And if anybody watched the NBA, LeBron's an Iron Man. He never misses games. and it could have been worse for sure, but this is definitely a scary injury. The Lakers, they're without Anthony Davis, so they're playing without him since before the All-Star break. Now they lose LeBron. And they've dropped the third in the Eastern Conference. The Phoenix Suns beat them last night. They passed them in the standings. You got the Clippers that are right on their heels. And I don't think that home court means as much because most arenas don't have fans. But you don't want to drop too far because I look at the 4 or 5 matchup. If you had to play Denver in the first round or a Portland, that's not something you want. But for the Lakers to be without their 2 top players, it's going to be very difficult for them to win games. They're also without Marc Gasol, their starting center right now. So they're in trouble for sure. The best news is that it's not a serious injury. So LeBron should be able to take some time off it, come back, get to play. So that's the good news. But I still look at the standings and I say you don't want to be playing a tough team in the first round with LeBron at age 36, with Anthony Davis being out all year. Who knows how his conditioning is going to be? They're saying he should be back in a couple weeks. No news on LeBron yet when it comes to timetable. But the Lakers are clearly a favorite. I think Brooklyn is slightly better team than them. They've been without Kevin Durant for over a month. But when he's playing, he's the best player in the NBA, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens there. But you got Brooklyn, who continues to get better with James Harden and Kyrie Irving getting better chemistry. And then you have, the Lakers with all kinds of injuries. You're chasing Utah, you're chasing Phoenix now. So we'll see what happens. But good news and bad for the Lakers, where it's not a more serious injury, but at the same time, you're going to be without him. You're likely going to struggle when it comes to winning games. Other tough injury news over the weekend, I mentioned the Charlotte Hornets. They've been a feel-good story. Forever, Michael Jordan's team has struggled. They've only made the playoffs twice in his time as owner. They've only won 3 playoff games. And, they drafted LaMelo Ball this year, 3rd overall. And the kid's been amazing. He's the son of LeVar, brother of Lonzo. And he was going to be Rookie of the Year, hands down. Averaging over 16 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists a game. Fantastic rookie season. But then we learned last night that he's out for the season with a fractured wrist. Really tough news. Charlotte currently sits 8th in the Eastern Conference playoff standings. I think it's going to be very tough for them to make the playoffs without him because he's been starting. He's been a really big part of their offense. So that's a big blow to Charlotte. And obviously to LaMelo. I think the kid's been so fun to watch this year. He's different than his brother because his shot isn't great either, but he's a super creative player. He's not afraid of the big moment. And, I think he was clearly going to win Rookie of the Year. So it opens up that race. But for Charlotte, for Michael Jordan, you got to be saying, come on, we're going to make the playoffs. We actually have a player to be excited about. And, Charlotte didn't look like a bad team. So tough break for Charlotte, for sure. They're still in the 8th spot, and the way the Eastern Conference is with Atlanta and Boston and the Knicks all kind of bottled together. Then below them, you have Chicago, the Raptors, currently outside the playoffs looking in. So this may give a team in the bottom of the standings a chance because without LaMelo, it drops a lot of the offense. It drops a lot of the creativity out of that Charlotte offense, and I don't know how much they're going to be able to do. But I mentioned the Raptors. They're currently 11th in the Eastern Conference. They've lost 8 in a row, including a game to Cleveland last night. But NBA trade deadline's on Thursday. And, the big debate will be, what do the Raptors do with Kyle Lowry? He's in the last year of his contract. I don't think he'll be back next year. I think he'll want to go to a contender. I think the Raptors in a little bit of a transition here. I don't see them winning a title anytime soon with the roster that they have. So does Kyle Lowry want to come back? Again, it's kind of a sentimental thing. Would they bring him back on a 1-2 year deal because he's, quote unquote, the best Raptor of all time? That's organizations do that. I don't know if it'd be the smartest move for this team, but I'm sure for fans, they'd love to see that. But it's been, he's been asked forever. Do you think you're going to be traded? Do you think you're going to be traded? He said he doesn't want to be. If he does get traded, he's fine with it. If I'm the Raptors right now, you've lost 8 in a row. Yes, you had COVID and you went through all that, but you had the full lineup last night against Cleveland and you lost. Cleveland is not a juggernaut. They're a below average team. They're below the Raptors in the standings. They beat the Raptors last night. It does not look good in Toronto. So I look at it that way and say, well, that's ugly. So scratch that one off the list. But if I'm the Raptors, you got 2 expiring contracts. You got Kyle Lowry. You got Norman Powell. I'd trade both of them. Because if the Raptors miss the playoffs, if you make the playoffs, okay, great. You make it as the 8th seed, you're going to lose to Philly or Brooklyn. Whoever it is, you're not going to beat them. And I still think there's this sentimentality saying, well, if the Raptors get in, they can do anything. No, they're not beating Brooklyn. They're not beating Philadelphia in a playoff series. Joel Embiid is not going to get shut down like he did before. The guy's playing at an MVP level this year. So if I'm the Raptors, I really look into trading away Kyle Lowry. You want to get assets for him. You want to get a young player, build towards the draft. Kyle will come back. He'll have his jersey retired. All that noise, that will happen. But for right now, you got to think about the short term and the long term of your franchise. And for me, the smart move is trading away Lowry, getting your assets, and being better set up in the future. And I don't know if that's the way they're going to go. But you lose 8 in a row, you got to look in the mirror. They still have some tough matchups. They got to play Utah again this year. They play Phoenix twice. They got to go through LA out west. Like, it doesn't get easy for this team. You're going to have tough matchups. You're chasing teams already. And what a game tonight. You got the Toronto Raptors visiting the Houston Rockets. Raptors have lost 8 in a row. The Houston Rockets have lost 20 straight games. They're sitting at 11-30 at the record. It's ugly in Houston right now. Again, they traded James Harden. Poor first-year head coach Steven Silas has been left with nothing, with John Wall being inadequate, missing Christian Wood for a long period of time. They're starting center. 20 straight losses is hard to do, but a streak's going to end tonight. Do the Rockets get off the schneid, or do the Raptors win their first time in 9 games? So a lot to be decided this week. I don't think the Raptors will trade Kyle Lowry. That's just my read on the situation. But if it was me, if I'm Masai Ujiri, I got to think about doing it. And of course, Masai has not signed a new contract yet. He's a free agent at the end of the year. So does he stay or go? A lot to watch in Toronto when it comes to the Raptors. But a game tonight where you have 2 really bad teams. We'll go head to head and we'll see what happens and who can end their streak. Because if the Raptors don't turn it around soon, it's going to be too late to even make the playoffs this year. And the way it's going, the only way they're going to is to be an 8 seed, which is not a great situation either. Just it comes up in the calendar, Major League Baseball. It's 10 days away. Opening day is next Thursday, which is crazy. It's spring training is such a grind because it's a month of exhibition games. And I don't take any stock in exhibition games because here's why. In 2008, the Detroit Lions went undefeated in the preseason. Undefeated. Look great, juggernauts. They get to the regular season, they went 0-16. So that preseason record was meaningless because that year they stunk. I've seen players have terrible preseasons. They get a point in 6 games. They go and light up the league. So you got to take everything you see in spring training with a grain of salt. Pitchers could have a great spring training. They get day 1 of the season, they get torched. Again, batters, Blue Jays are really excited because they're playing great in spring training. And you know what? More power to them. You play, you're playing well, good on you. And they got guys like Alejandro Kirk, who's battling to be the backup catcher. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., obviously the prodigy that they're hoping will take a next step this year. Both batting over 400 in the spring. Vladdy's been hitting them out of the park. Alejandro Kirk's actually batting closer to 500. He's looking like a player that's going to be used quite frequently this season. So they got a lot of positive things going on. They still I still think their defense needs to improve. Their pitching depth is not where you'd want it to be, but there's some good things happening in the Blue Jays organization. But again, it's spring training. You're playing teams where you go to the ballpark and then you're there for a while, then you go golfing and then you go pitch. I mean, spring training is not the most taxing thing in the world. So I think we need to look at this, every team with a grain of salt. I mean, you can look at on paper and say the Los Angeles Dodgers look pretty good. And I'm still going to say that whether it's spring training, whether it's game, 162. You look at their staff with Trevor Bauer, Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, David Price. It's deadly. That's not going to change. I look at the San Diego Padres with Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis Jr. and acquiring Blake Snell. Yu Darvish. I really like that roster. Whether they're batting 121 in spring training, if Tatis doesn't have a hit in spring training yet, I don't care because I really like the look of that roster. And then you look across the league, it's just a lot of bad teams. Detroit Tigers stink. Baltimore Orioles stink. Cleveland Indians shouldn't be good this year. But what's going to happen? Are the Red Sox even going to be competitive? There's a lot of decent storylines. The Chicago Cubs, what the hell are they doing? They still have Chris Bryant. They've been trying to trade him for 3 years. Will they ever pull the trigger? Where does Anthony Rizzo fit into their long-term future? The Mets spend all this money. Will they make it work? I'm going to get into more of this next week. I'm going to have a season preview show where I go through most of the teams, including the Blue Jays, but also a lot of the great teams around baseball, kind of what teams did over the offseason, spending money or lack thereof, where I see the game right now, what can they do to improve it. We're going to go through all of that. But yeah, April 1st is opening day, and that's next Thursday. There's a list of games that day. You got Yankees playing the Blue Jays, I know. So that'll obviously be a game to watch. But interesting enough, the Blue Jays are going to start their season in Dunedin, Florida, where their single A team plays. Then they plan on pivoting to Buffalo when it gets to May and June, just because it gets so hot down in Dunedin. So playing in Buffalo, and then I think they hope to return to Toronto at some point during the season. But with COVID and everything, I would not be holding my breath if I was a Toronto Blue Jays fan hoping to get to a game, because we've seen so far during this pandemic, number one, things change. And Canada's been really tentative to try anything when it comes to sporting events or even gatherings. So I would not expect the Fauci of Canada, I don't know who that would be, to give the okay to have sporting events, because we've been playing fraidy cat for a long period of time here, and I would not expect a change in mindset overnight. But maybe if there's a lot of money on the line, maybe there will be. But yeah, MLB 10 days away, and you'll get through spring training. Again, not a lot of the games are on TV, but it's a grind to get through it. And then when the real games start, I'm going to be all over it here. Again, just preseason's meaningless to me. Tom Brady plays in the preseason. I don't care if he never completes a pass. You see in the NFL, quarterbacks play 2 snaps and they're out of the game. I mean, it's just, I give more credit to the players in spring training, because they have to play for over a month before the season starts, and then they got to play 162. So kudos to them for grinding through and getting to the end of the finish line here. So it'll be good to see the season start next week. We're going to wrap up today talking about some golf. Good story over the weekend. Honda Classic. We didn't have a great, it wasn't a huge name with a lot of big names at the Honda Classic down in Florida. But we did see Matt Jones win the tournament by 5 strokes, really dominating, shooting a 61 on Thursday. But he ended a 6-year drought for himself, winning his second PGA Tour event. So good, great for him. He's guaranteed to play at the Masters. When you win a tournament, you're guaranteed to play at the major events. So big news for him. So not a lot of big names. Like I said, a couple weeks to go. We got match play coming up. We should see some big names get on the course again before Augusta, so they get some practice in the next couple weeks. But the big news last night was Brooks Koepka tweeted out that he had surgery on March 18th, right knee surgery. This is his second knee surgery in a calendar year, and his status for the Masters is uncertain. He had the cast on using crutches. It didn't look like he'd be playing, golf on April 8th. And that's when the Masters starts. Goes from April 8th to the 12th. But Brooks is a 4-time major champion, one of the best players in the world. And for him and Tiger to miss this tournament potentially, it'd be really deflating. I think Brooks, winning the Waste Management, getting another top 5 finish right before, and then we saw him pull out of the Arnold Palmer, pull out of the tournament last week. So it's too bad because he had shoulder surgery and two knee surgeries in the last calendar year. Is his body breaking down? I mean, he's a bigger dude. He's kind of built like DeChambeau, but obviously they got to figure this out. But it would be a huge blow to the tournament, and obviously to Koepka, who really he plays golf because it gives him money, but he gears up for the majors. He plays the other events just to get practice. He plays the majors because he wants to win. He wants that money. He wants the notoriety. And with Augusta starting in a couple weeks, 2 weeks Thursday, it's interesting to see if he can get himself back on the course by then. I have my doubts. Obviously, a knee surgery. I'm not a doctor, but it sure doesn't seem like he'll be back on the course in time. But without major champions like him and Tiger in the field, it will lead to more opportunities for other players to break through and potentially win Augusta National. And we also saw interesting this week. Rory Mcilroy came out and said that he's been struggling lately because he's trying to play like DeChambeau, and he said he's trying to get more off the tee. He's trying to, and I find that so funny because Rory Mcilroy is a better player than Bryson DeChambeau. He's got more majors. He's an overall better player than him. But it just shows you what, if somebody's doing something well, they're having success, others try to copycat it. And Rory McIlroy was that, that afraid, or that, that with that much lack of confidence to just follow DeChambeau's lead and not say, well, I'm doing stuff well. I'm a major champion. I'm a stud. No, I'm going to do what he does and see what happens. Well, it's not going to work. You got to play your game. And for Rory, it's worked forever. But his mental state to be that weak to say and admit it publicly that I'm trying to be Bryson DeChambeau 2.0, number one, it's a really bad look. And then it also makes me really worry about Rory McIlroy and where his headspace is when it comes to winning golf tournaments and doing it, So interesting story there where he, openly admitted it. But we'll see what happens there with Rory, because he's an interesting guy, and the only major he's never won is Augusta. So he's had a couple tough tournaments in the past couple weeks, and we'll see what he can bring in the not too distant future. But that's going to wrap it up for today. Again, March Madness still in full swing. We got baseball coming up, hockey's going, NBA. So a lot of sports are going to be on at once here. I love it. Flick the stations, get the computer going. So it's, a big UFC pay-per-view this weekend as well. So, I'll keep you guys all informed. And I'll be back on several times this week doing a show tonight with Craig Eagles on Facebook at 7:45. So you can join me for that. But until next time, everybody stay safe, enjoy the nice weather, and we'll talk soon.